you are at the Organic Land Management for Parks and Playing Fields workshop, if that's where you are hoping to be. So my name is Rella Abernathy. I work for the City of Boulder, Colorado, and I am the Integrated Pest Management Coordinator there. And I call it the Ecological Integrated Pest Management Program, and I shouldn't have to do that because that should be redundant. But unfortunately, since IPM has been kind of co-opted by a lot of special interests to mean something that it isn't, I use that qualifier to make it clear that what we're trying to do when we manage our properties, and IPM is really a property management or a landscape management or a building management tool or way of thinking about things. It's not a killing things approach, which is what a lot of people have tried to do. So as you listen to the speakers today talk about the various things we all have in common, you'll see that there's an underlying set of principles that we use when we manage different types of properties. And each property is a little different, or each type of site. Some of us work in cities like I do and manage. I am the coordinator of people who actually manage the properties, and I work on policy. But there are people who manage parks or wildlands or buildings and different types of sites like that, golf courses, which have their own issues that you deal with on a case-by-case basis. And then we have a university management. Chip can talk about school management. And then it's really important for the public that they have good information in places where they can buy things like soil testing, soil tests or products, amendments, organic fertilizers, humic acid, and things like that. And that's why it's so important that we have the business community step in and provide that information and those products to the public. So we have it kind of covered here, and one thing I want to say about the City of Boulder is that we've had our chemical-free managed turf grass now since 2002. So there have been no herbicides, fungicides, insecticides, anything on our grass. And we still win. Our athletic fields are tournament quality athletic fields, and we have won national awards for best athletic field, not best organic field, but best athletic field, showing proof of concept that these things work. They don't just work in Boulder, they work here in Irvine, they work on the East Coast, they work everywhere. So first up, and we have our slides ready, Rhiannon Bailard from Pepperdine University, who is the director of the Center for Sustainability. And she spoke earlier at our other workshop about their rodent program of getting rid of rodenticides, but they're also leading the way in universities of transitioning to organic lawn care. So I'll let her tell you about that.
So hi, everybody. My name is Rhiannon. It's so nice to be here with all of you. And just to kick it off, so to speak, I'm on this panel certainly not as an expert, but really as a student of organic land management. As Rella said, Pepperdine is in the middle of transitioning over to an organic land management program. And so I'm really proud of the progress that we've made so far, but we definitely have a lot of ground to cover, no pun intended there. So what I'm going to do first is give you just a little bit of history and context with respect to our land management strategies generally, and because this actually feeds into then what we're doing right now. So the first thing that I want to share is, so many people drive by Pepperdine and see the big green lawn out front, and the first thought is, why do you have a giant green lawn in the middle of Southern California? What are you guys doing? And I completely understand that sentiment. We do indeed. We are indeed situated in a Mediterranean climate. But when we moved to the Malibu campus in 1972, there was no regional wastewater system. And so we paid for a wastewater treatment system. But at the time, we did something that was really novel, which was we brought back all of the reclaimed water for reuse in our irrigation program. So that turf lawn is out there not because we are ignorant of the fact that you should not have a lawn in Southern California unless you need it for, a recreation or athletic field, which is of course what we're talking about today. But it's because of the fact that we need to reuse all of that reclaimed water that's generated. And so we specifically put the turf lawn there because of its evapotranspiration rate. Relatedly, we also have a hydrogeological monitoring program. We're literally tracking every drop of water that's applied to the campus to make sure that our irrigation practices on the campus are not exacerbating existing downslope landslides. So we're tracking soil moisture, we're tracking groundwater levels, we're making sure that we're putting just that amount of irrigation necessary to keep the plants healthy, but at the same time to reuse all of that reclaimed water. And then relevant to the conversation that we had earlier, we also have, many people aren't aware that our campus, I'll actually go to this next slide and then switch back. This is a picture of our campus, and I know it's hard to see, but the dashed line is the boundary of our campus, and you can see the campus there nestled on the bottom, and then Malibu along the ocean there. We have an 830-acre campus, and over 500 of those acres, which you can see there, are maintained in an absolutely native state. And at the same time, within our managed area, everybody thinks of the turf lawn, but we actually have over 45 acres of native vegetation, even within our managed landscape ground. So we're doing a lot from the just general land management perspective. And then even before we committed to an organic land management strategy that we're working on right now, I do want to give a lot of credit to our head of landscaping, Alan Goff, who had worked hard to eliminate about 50% of synthetics before we even entered into a discussion about IPM. And I know I'm learning that's a controversial term, but before we entered into a discussion about IPM. Now, Chip mentioned this earlier just during the last presentation. And one of the issues that we face is, a good problem to have, which is Pepperdine is often said to be one of the most beautiful campuses in the country. And so we've got those high aesthetic expectations. So frankly, we were kind of at a point where we were stuck. We had eliminated some of those synthetics, but hey, we still have to maintain these campus aesthetics. So what can we do about that? I do want to just briefly mention, I talked about this on a panel earlier this morning, as Rella said. We eliminated the use of rodenticides on campus. And the reason I bring this up, in addition to it being a really great thing, and by the way, the reason it's so problematic, those rodenticides, is because they bioaccumulate and up through the predator species, and the predator species themselves end up as non-target species dying off. So we were able to implement a completely rodenticide-free program, which essentially looked at eliminating food sources for those rodents, eliminating bait boxes, and utilizing live trapping. And then the second phase was utilizing raptor perches around campus. So just sharing some images of those. As often as I can use this slide, I like to use it because it's a great slide. But so the reason I share this when we're talking about recreation and athletic fields is because it was due to the success that we had with this program that it laid the foundation for us to be able to say, okay, if we were able to do it and not have this proliferation of rats and rodents on campus, perhaps there is something more that we can do with respect to some of these conventional synthetic products. However, I won't say it was as easy as we did rodenticides and then we, eliminated our use of synthetics. Essentially, we reached a tipping point, which was the same group that alerted us to the problems with the rodenticides, called Poison Free Malibu, also drove by one day and saw some of our facilities professionals spraying the lawn for clover. Contacted us and we had a conversation. I spoke about the fact that, but we've got these expectations. We have to have that turf lawn. How are we supposed to deal with that? And she said, well, have you heard of this gentleman by the name of Chip Osborne, who's sitting right here? And I said, no, I haven't. And she said that, he transitioned the White House lawn, Obama's lawn, over to completely organic. I don't know if that's actually true, but it was enough to pique my... Is it true or not true?
No, I trained the White House grounds.
Well, then it is true. Okay, same
Whatever
thing.
they did after that, we don't know.
So I heard that was enough to pique my interest, and I said, we got to get this Chip guy out. And I skipped ahead, but let me say, what Chip did that was so phenomenal is he sat down with us, and he talked about this earlier today with respect to his approach. completely non-confrontational, completely not coming from a place of attack or critique, coming from a place of empathy, patience, education, collaboration, understanding that the groundskeepers have certain, we talked about them earlier, certain expectations, and he understood that and understood that it wasn't just, let's eliminate all of these overnight and, come what may of the look of the property. And so we decided to go through an iterative approach, just as he outlined earlier today. And so we selected, as part of a stakeholder group, several locations on campus. I won't run through all of them, but essentially what we did, these were locations that had native vegetation, ornamental vegetation. These were locations that were sort of informal recreation spaces, locations that were our athletic fields, as well as a dirt stockpile that we were going to use ultimately to construct into a recreation field. Ultimately, what we found is that we had really low microbial content essentially in most of the soil samples that we took. We decided, we were talking earlier about this sort of proof of concept model. We decided to focus on the soccer field, and you can see why here. This is the before picture. And what was so interesting is that our athletics department, and by the way, this is NCAA Division I soccer. So this is a very critically important field for us. And our athletics department was supportive as long as we could ensure that we were not going to degrade the health of the field. Well, obviously we were having some issues with the field to begin with. But so that's what Chip's not promise, but essentially promise was, we are going to be able to do this in such a way that you're going to be able to maintain that functionality of the field. This is the after. He shared this picture earlier. But essentially what we did was we transitioned. We eliminated gradually the use of products that we were using previously, including 2,4-D, is that how you say it? Speed Zone. I don't know the tech, but Speed Zone, as well as synthetic fertilizers. We also, you saw earlier here, we were doing a fill and drill with sand. That obviously wasn't working, and so we replaced our top dressing with the compost instead. And by doing these activities, we ended up with a soccer field that is beyond expectations of our athletic department. And so what's incredible about this is now that we have this proof of concept, we are able to transition to other locations on campus. So for example, this right here is a new recreation field that just went in. As I mentioned previously, we had dirt that was stockpiled. We tested that dirt, and Chip was able to support exactly what, the amount of compost and the amount of other supplements that we needed to put into that field in order to ensure that it would be healthy. We actually right now have people, the majority of the campus thinks that it's nestled in the back of our campus. The majority of our campus actually thinks that this is an AstroTurf field because it's so green. So that just gives you a sense of that. I don't have a picture of it, but we also, Chip, I think you took some pictures of it. We have a ficus tree that is, I wish I had a picture. It's so beautiful. It's near our recreation center, and it was dying because of a recent renovation project that we just did. Thank you. And all we did was add compost to it, and it's just completely regenerated. But it's those small successes that are resulting in the ownership and the accountability of our facilities team. So this is not something now that the Center for Sustainability is pushing on them or Chip is pushing on them. It is now their philosophy that they're adopting as well. Next up is the baseball field. And again, we're able to take that proof of concept from the soccer field and apply it to the baseball field. And these were just some of the criteria, and Chip mentioned this earlier. I probably should have put this earlier in the slides, but essentially these were the things that we're thinking about as we're designing the program. And I won't go through all of them, but of course, some of them, it's the visibility and the expectations, but the functional use and intensity. Is this an athletic field? Is it a recreation field? Is this a place of informal gathering? How is this being used to determine what those expectations would be? The type of landscaping, is it going to be a native? Is it instead an ornamental? What does that look like? Again, back to the amount and type of water. We've got reclaimed water for over 99% of our irrigation, but there are certain areas where we are only able to use potable water. And then special seasonal requirements in terms of, hey, it's graduation. What are there changing expectations? Now, I do want to say that we are still in the process of working through some specific issues, and I do want to mention this in particular, clover. And I think you spoke about this earlier, about the benefits of clover, or someone spoke about this earlier, the benefits of clover. It fixes nitrogen, and somebody provided all of the various benefits, including it can grow in low soil content and everything else. It's fantastic. The issue is, again, we have now an aesthetic standard that clover is not something you're supposed to have in your lawn. And of course, that came up following World War II, when that whole clever thing of, we're going to get you to get rid of the clover with the herbicides, and then we're going to give you the fertilizers, and we're going to have you pay for both of those. But nevertheless, we're now dealing with this situation where we're not able to find an appropriate replacement to eliminate the clover. So now it's not just looking at, you've got this product, this conventional product over here, what's the alternative product? We are not able to find an alternative product that works. And so now it's changing expectations and working with our stakeholders, working with our community to understand and educate, here are the benefits of clover, here's why. Instead of looking at clover and thinking, oh, look at that terrible weed, now we want to look at clover and think, oh, isn't that fantastic? That's proof of their sustainable land management strategies. And so that's part of the process that we're working through right now. And then in closing, because I know I'm running out of time, this is an image of our landscaping team. And of course, this doesn't have to do with organic land management, I guess, per se, but that's them with electronic equipment, which also has safety issues and health concerns, right? The gasoline fumes, and also this transition was fantastic. But I share this just because these are the guys behind the scenes who have made this program possible and who, again, have really bought into this. And I have so much credit that I need to give to Chip, as well as Alan Goff, our head of landscaping, who's not here, because of their willingness to work collaboratively to adopt this as their philosophy. And a huge aspect of that has been because of the approach that Chip has taken, which is let's educate, let's collaborate, let's do this on a participation level. It's not an us versus them. This is a journey that we're all on together. And so it's just been a real pleasure to be a part of it. So thank you so much.
Okay, so next we're going to talk about the business community who's stepping up and providing information and products for the public so that people can start transitioning in their own yards, because think of all the land that's in people's own private property and how that needs to be part of the solution too. So next is John is going to talk to us about the program they have at Eldridge Hardware, which is an Ace hardware store in York, Maine. You heard John earlier in the plenary session. And Scott Eldridge is in the audience. He owns the stores. And they've been transitioning their store to organic methods and products since 2015.
This is a short film that Jay did several years ago.
We are here to talk about what we're doing with clearing ourselves of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides.
Chemicals are in the back, and aisle 18 is where the organics are. John Bochert, I was hired by Scott over here in 2013 because I think he had an inkling that we were kindred spirits in the switching over to the organic methods. The first thing was to banish the low-hanging fruit. The first thing to go was the neonicotinoid insecticides as totally incompatible with organic methods or any common sense. It doesn't make any sense to put a pesticide on everything before you know whether it has a problem or not. Let me show you this. The chemicals are now down to about 8 feet. It's not product-based. It's not product swap-off. It's more of a cultural thing to do.
Holistic approach.
It's a holistic approach. So that brought me down to what is the holistic part of it, and it comes down to soil, the life in the soil. We talked about microbes. The first section I wanted people to see was talking about the living soil. Here's where we're going to put our microbial simulators. You get the soil testers, beneficial insects down below.
science behind the soil. It's not as simple as just putting one product down and expecting everything to turn out well. It's a finely balanced system.
That's where the soil test comes in.
Which is quite difficult, I think. It's been difficult to get the importance of doing soil tests to find out where you stand.
Organic fertilizers will feed the microbes, as will compost.
The crux of that is organic material. There is no organic material in Miracle-Gro or any soluble fertilizer. There's no organic material in there. Organic material is what feeds the microbes. The microbes turn that into products that can be used by the roots of the plant.
Well, our vegetable and flower seeds we get from High Mowing Farm in Vermont. We also get some out of Iowa from Seed Savers. And Johnny Selected Seeds, Fedco.
You've also developed your own greenhouse.
We have. Well, we wanted to provide organic seedlings primarily for vegetable seedlings, but we also did flowers this year, hanging baskets, and on and on. And people loved it. They came from all over to get something that didn't necessarily have neonicotinoids in it. And you know, anyone serious about organics has a hard job finding a hanging basket that isn't infused with neonics. Most of those seeds are hybrids. And that can be good in many ways, but we kind of like the flavor of stuff that was grown 200 years ago.
The hybridization process can weaken, it looks for certain traits, but it can also weaken other traits.
And what I've found in growing some corn is that it doesn't attract the bugs like the hybrids do, the super sweet varieties.
They are terrified of the white grubs stealing their lawn. Trying to explain to people leaving your grass higher makes it less apt that the larvae, that they're going to want to plant a larvae in there. Leaving your grass drier. She doesn't want to plant, Japanese beetle doesn't want to plant her eggs in a dry lawn. She wants a moist environment.
This year it's been largely or overwhelmingly positive. I really only had a few people that were disappointed we didn't carry the products they were used to.
I just got back from the ACE fall show, and I was pleasantly surprised to see a lot more organic product on display there. And it really took me kind of by surprise.
A lot of these things are yet to be available. As more people want them, they become available.
Because they knew we had the organic section, and when they saw it, they just focused on what they were here for. They picked out the varieties they wanted and left with them very happy. You're protecting the environment, and you're protecting your family, your children or grandchildren, or your neighbors. Nobody wants to have pesticides drifting into their front or rear yard, and people are just loving it. They're feeding into it. I couldn't be happier.
So that was that was done a few years ago when we were neophytes in the business, and we were quite pleased. Jay came down to talk to us that day, and he just hauled out a movie camera and started questioning us. I hope we've gotten our things together a little bit better by now, and we'd love to do another one of those, I think. As a matter of fact, we're going to open a 24,000 square foot store in Portland, Maine. Portland's the biggest city in Maine, and they've passed Maine's one of the 7 states in the country that allows the local municipalities to pass their own pesticide ordinances. And Portland has passed a pesticide ordinance, phased in over 3 years. And we're going to be the first big hardware store to have a full service, purely organic lawn and garden department. We're looking forward to that very much. And it's drawn the attention of the chemical companies. They've tried twice now. They tried in the last session of the legislature to change the law regarding the preemption laws. They failed miserably, we're proud to say. And this year they tried it again, and it failed again by overwhelming majorities. So Maine's taking very big advantage of the fact that they can do that, and the state and the towns are falling one by one in Maine. York, where we live, is next. We're working on that now with some people. Falmouth, across the border in New Hampshire, they're not allowed to restrict pesticides on private land, but they have been doing it on public land. Portsmouth, New Hampshire has done it, Dover, Rochester, all the way up. All these towns are related to the Atlantic and to the tidal rivers that are there in New Hampshire, and they're having terrible times with runoff into the tidal rivers. This is all being driven by people like you in the seats right now, and it takes, what I'm finding out from this whole project is it takes individuals to make decisions, to make bold decisions based on public health. And what we found here with Scott making his decision that he wanted these chemicals off the shelf, and we did it in fairly rapid fashion because people were pushing for it. Once we started talking about it, people were behind us 100%. But the decision made at the top is what stimulates people. And when people make bold decisions based on public health, people will follow. And we see this time and again. We remember George W. Bush. Everybody, the decisions he was making, everybody said, well, at least he's true to he's always true to his heart. And people will follow you. And people have followed us. And it's a good lesson to take away from this. Whenever we talk to, I end up talking to municipal people all the time. And I'll look right at the parks manager and say, what are you afraid of? Make the decision. Tell the people in your community that you're making this decision to protect their health, and you're trying to tell me they won't follow you. They will follow you. So I'm happy to get up every morning because my job happens to be my passion, but I go to work at 7 o'clock in the morning, and my job is to convince just 1 or 2 people to change their attitude about these chemicals. We hear from Chip, these things work. We see the pictures that it works. I see it in my own yard that it works. I invite people to my house to see how you take care of crabgrass, how you deal with grub problems. There's such a fear mentality brought about by the chemical companies that we deal with that every day. And the issues with retail is that nobody's written a book on this. We have no a diagram to follow on how to do this. We're an Ace hardware store. Ace can give you detailed plans on how to train your staff to sell paint, to sell light bulbs, to sell screwdrivers, but organic gardening, there's no plan for it. So we are writing it as we go, and results have been spectacular so far. People will follow us, and Scott can tell you, we'll get into it in the workshop here, that the profits are up to boot. And I don't believe that is just because of the organics. The publicity that we've received by being bold about it and going this way has carried over into all the other segments of the business, and I'm sure of it. I've been there for 4 years, and the amount of goods, all goods that are coming through the back door, the hardware, everything is just exploded. We've outgrown the area we are right now, the building we have right now and the parking lot. So we're very excited about a new store in Portland, and a couple of things that I deal with on a day-to-day basis. Am I going too long, or a couple minutes? Okay, good, thanks. Teaching the help. There's also no plan for how we do that. We're making that up as we go along too. That when you're dealing with a customer, we have to provide information. We're educators. We've decided that, they always say that in retail you'll go broke at trying to educate the public. We've decided in our case, we're breaking new ground, so we might as well break new ground there too. We paper the walls with information, whether it be a bumper sticker type statement about organic gardening, organic farming, about lawn care. We have a couple of employees right now that I work with that are non-lawn people. One is has a background in permaculture, which is great, but a permaculture person has no use for turf at all. And as we always say, these are plants that are native of the British Isles. They don't like the hot summers that we have in Maine. That's why we like the clover in the lawn to stay green. But they always go brown in July and August. And keeping these things alive, on a massive basis. The first thing I'll ask a customer when they want to switch over from chemical to organic lawn care, the first thing I ask is, how many square feet do you have? I just want to know what we're talking about. And somebody will go, 50 or 60,000 square feet. And I'll look at them and I'll say, you know, does the high school soccer team come and practice on your front yard? And, what do you mean? I said, why do you need 60,000 square feet of lawn? And I don't say it in a negative way. I just question it. And sometimes, more often than not, they look at me and they go, nobody's ever asked me that before. So on a daily basis, each one of these customers needs to be, you can't be contemptuous of people. I call it TDC. I try to tell the help. I got this from a friend of mine who's in the restaurant business. TDC stands for thinly disguised contempt. And it's very easy to do when people are coming in and they've got a hat on that says Walk for Cancer, and they're pained at whether they should switch to an organic fertilizer for their lawn from a chemical one. And they've just done a Walk for Cancer. And so this happens all the time. You get people that are a little upset about what we're doing, but overwhelmingly it's been positive, and it's a joy to get up in the morning and go to work and have that be my work for the final phase of my life. Although sometimes I was looking forward to a little retirement, but unfortunately I'm needed elsewhere. But I guess the message I want to say from the East Coast is that things are going well. And the other thing I want to say is that I really think I love hearing about the science, the epidemiology that's going on, the study of the endocrine system. I love all of this, but what it comes right down to is people voting with their wallets. I don't think people that come in the door, I don't think I can give them all this information. They can go on the internet and they'll find out information from Bayer or Monsanto that says just the opposite. The battle of science, as you know, can be bought and sold these days. And I say, why don't we just skip that and get down to some common sense? Scott and I are very common sense people. Are you going to go with the system that nature's been doing for 400 million years, or are you going to go with a chemical company that's been in business for 70 years, selling chemicals left over from World War II? And when you put it that way to people, when they think about it and you don't do it in a condescending way, that is what's going to change the world. And I heard Will Bonsall mentioned it. Will Bonsall is quite a vegetable farmer in Maine, a seed saver. And he said that we don't vote just every 4 years or every 2 years. We vote every time we take our wallets out and buy a product. And we're finding out that people really like coming into our store and buying the products. They feel good about it, and they're voting that way. And aside from that, they love coming in there and not smelling chemicals. It's the first thing a lot of them say. They come down the lawn and garden aisle and says, it doesn't smell like chemicals. And so we're on the right track, and I'm proud to be here. I love coming to these things because I get inspired by everything that happens here. And it's been a real privilege to know Jay. Chip is my mentor, and I hope someday to have a PowerPoint as effective as yours. So I think that's all I got to say. If anybody wants to ask any questions about this, I didn't talk about products very much. There's some great products coming on the market. I say it again, I love red cedar oil as an insecticide for grubs. I've cured ear mites with red cedar oil on my dog. I use it as a repellent on myself. I have customers that couldn't sit on a patio because the mosquitoes were so bad, and spread some cedar chips, which is basically just cedar sawdust from the cedar grown in Texas, and spread a little bit around the patio and sat outside. Mosquitoes were gone. So as a repellent, as a tick repellent, the red cedar oil has been great. And I think that's about it. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Yeah. Questions now?
And then we'll have questions. One more talk, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions. No, we'll just ask. Okay, so we're going to hear from Chip again. And one of the things that I find inspirational about Chip, and I know all of us find Chip inspirational, is that You know, a lot of us, I've heard people here say today that I'm not a scientist or an ologist, but you can learn all these concepts on your own. If, all of us are capable of learning the biological principles. And if you really put everything you've got into it like Chip has, you can become a world expert in your area. And then you can go out and inspire people to make change on the ground. And that's what it really takes, is for each of us to commit to doing the right thing, learning what we need to learn, and getting out there and doing what we can do on our own in our own communities or anywhere we go to start changing and turning these things around. So with that, Chip will share his hard-learned knowledge that he spent years perfecting and show us the results of that.
Thank you, Rella. Thank you. So I have to say, it's one of the distinct pleasures of the weekend for me to share, you know, the platform, so to speak, with these three folks here. Rella and I go back quite a number of years, and for what she does and the awareness that she has raised and what she's done in Boulder and carried that forward is unparalleled. At Pepperdine, I don't know how to describe, you know, what impact, you know, Rhiannon has had there, and how that is probably, of all the projects I do in the country, to be able to dialogue at the level with Emily and with her, and then right down with the guys on the ground. And, you know, the first day I went in my jacket and all dressed up. And then the second day I was there, I put my jeans and my work boots on. You know, so to be able to go at both levels, and the fellas that she showed the picture of, absolutely outstanding. And John, the best student that I've ever had. I've never met anyone that I have talked with, and we've never spent lots of time. I mean, I visit, and I've been with Jay several times, and what he and Scott, what they've absorbed and how they give it back, I look at it and it's like I'm almost saying it myself. So my best for that. So here's an athletic field that gets almost 800 or 900 hours of scheduled use and another 300 or 400 of non-scheduled use. So this gets well over 1,000 hours of heavy use a year, and it is thick and it's lush and it's weed-free. One that has been organic since it was built. It was built conventionally and then transitioned. This is my town of Marblehead, Massachusetts. The idea that, you know, the industry, those companies that want to build the synthetic fields, say that you have to have a synthetic field because natural grass can only take 100 to 200 hours of use a year. So you're looking at grass there that gets 1,000. There's no bare spots. It's just good basic science of cultural practices and healthy soils, a little bit of grass seed, a little bit of fertilizer, and it goes from there. So I showed these slides earlier, the conventional view of soil. These two slides are from Penn State. And Penn State, you know, put on a symposium about 8 or 9 years ago, and I was invited. It was an ag conference. 25 people were invited, and I was the token land manager that was, you know, non-ag. And what they proposed was that conventionally we were taught to look at structure, which is sand, silt, and clay, chemistry, which is the macro and micronutrients, as well as the organic matter fraction and the ability of a soil to hold on to or retain nutrients, and then the biological fraction, that living part that I spoke about earlier. The conventional industry only focuses on chemistry. That's all they care about. They don't even test for texture, sand, silt, and clay. Look at the 4-step program where you have 4 bags that are marketed all over the country in widely different situations, widely different environmental, widely different soils. So that's pretty cookie cutter. Conventional industry barely acknowledges that biological life exists in the soil. And without naming names or saying the university, I'll just tell you a little story where I was at the unveiling of an organic pilot project. And this goes back, 10 or 12 years ago. And it was very successful and it produced a lot of results. I didn't have anything to do with it. A lot of results after year 1. And an extension agent from a major university who was there, who had been in turf grass management for 30 years as a professional, after this was all done and it was talking about compost teas and biological life and all of that, hand went up in the air and stood up and said, "So what's this about microbial life?" 30 years managing and never had any idea that there was anything other than NPK and pesticides to grow grass. So that was an eye-opener on where we are, the uphill battle that we have in trying to bring this kind of a management strategy mainstream. Because when you look at the extension, and I'm not trying to slam cooperative extensions around the country because they really do some very good things, but the reality that everything that we're talking about here is not embraced. And you still cannot go to any major university today and get an education in what we're talking about. So the education is by third-party, non-university systems where we're trying to bring that. We're actually working on bringing the educational model right here in Orange County to be able to go up and down the coast and to train landscape contractors. So Penn State proposed that these are definitely related to each other. We can't change the sand, silt, and clay. And I was talking to one of the municipalities here the day I flew in on Wednesday, and they had a professional consultant that had them top dressing and incorporating sand to try to improve drainage in your difficult California soils. And that's a cardinal rule for land management, is you never try to change soil texture. You work with what you have in every region of the country. And for anybody to think that I can take that well-draining sandy soil on Long Island and make that happen here in Southern California, or bring the high organic matter fraction soil in New England to Southern California, that's an exercise in futility. It can't happen. So that is a conventional consultant that just totally not even in the ballpark of where they should be. You see down on the right there, strong focus on humus. So we all understand that humates or humus is the end product of decomposition. So that humus is a very tiny fraction of the soil, but that's really what makes it work. Organic matter is the home for the microbial life. So now we know in an organic program, especially here in Southern California, where organic matter fraction is between 2 and 3%, and 3% is the low line. Some couple sites I work on right here in Irvine is 1.6%. 3% is what it takes to grow healthy plants. So we just don't have the organic matter. We probably can never get it too much higher. So we surgically target the humic fraction. Humic fraction is less than 1% of that 2%, tiny. But if we do something as simple as a couple of ounces of humic acid incorporated into a liquid application, now we're targeting it. I see Fred Newcomb up here from a company back east, PJC Organic, who's out here looking to bring organic fertilizers of the highest quality to Southern California. And he has created a product where he put a carbon source in an NPK fertilizer. And he put microbial food in there, unheard of. It's not just NPK anymore, but it's that combined with the stuff that it really takes to make the soil function. Systems-based approach, I've mentioned this a couple of times. 3 concepts: understanding biological life in the soil, exclusive use of natural organic product. You absolutely have to get rid of the salt-based fertilizers, and revised cultural practices. We test, so we do repeated testings of chemistry, texture, and biology. We test initially. We test to monitor because what we're doing is science-based. So we have protocols established on benchmarks for success. Soil testing is one of those benchmarks. Here's an interesting thing for some of you that may have never seen this. This is a biological assay of the life in the soil. So this is a test that actually tells us what is living there and what we actually want to have grown. So you can look here, active bacteria total, active fungal total. So these are the guys right here that are breaking down grass clippings or compost or organic fertilizer. These guys here are the higher level predators that consume those guys and make nitrogen available. So this is good. This is a high number. These guys are low. So based on this soil test, this is telling me that over here, this soil naturally can produce less than 25 pounds of nitrogen per acre per year. That number should be 150 plus. So then the first thing I know is that we have to go and improve that fraction there. That's part of the strategy. That's what we did at Pepperdine. That was identifying this, and that was more important than the NPK. Here's a before and after. Here's right here in Irvine. So this is the Irvine Unified School District. Kathleen Halal reached out to Beyond Pesticides 2.5 years ago, and with our SWAT program, engaged and said we'd like to set up some pilot projects here. Now we have Non-Toxic Irvine that has come in, Bob Johnson, Kim Conti, Christina Shea, that are driving this process and making it happen. This was what it looked like 2.5 years ago. It was in tough shape. It was hard as a rock. It was completely solid. It was actually a safety issue for the kids. You can see that's a mismatch, not a lot going on there. And here's what it looked like on Friday morning. So the idea that, and I don't know, this is actually a little panoramic video, but I don't have a mouse here, so we'll just look at the picture. But the idea that this was a biologically driven program, where what we're looking at here is what I expected to see at the end of 2 years, and we're experiencing it about 15 months. Now, granted, here in California, as Fred pointed out, we have a lot longer growing season than we do back in the Northeast, but still, we didn't expect this to happen so fast. Here's the video, there it goes. So you can see in the panorama, we have refilled the bare spots, we have replaced the weeds with grass. There's still a few weeds out there, but that wasn't the focus in year one. The focus was try to build the soil and create something differently, different than what we started with. Boulder, Colorado, Rella had me out there in 2010. This park was a newly built park, about 6 years old. We were looking at all the properties in the city, and they said, well, let's not bother. This one's so bad, we're just going to redo it. I said, well, we're always up for a challenge. This was not anywhere near a sophisticated program as we have today, but cool season grasses, not warm season. 2010, 2014, basic program, no pesticides or synthetics, very compacted, bare spots, totally anaerobic. It was puddly and it smelled. So here's what it looked like. That's how compacted it was. That's all we could get down in the soil. So we began to work and systematically change that soil so it better supported the grass and less support of the weeds. You can see that there's challenges, and then all of a sudden, 3 years almost to the month, and we had that. And that, and that, and now the weeds are gone, the grass is there, because we systematically changed that biological complex, got rid of the bad guys, fostered the growth of the good guys, and, actually, again, exceeded expectations, and probably saved the city of Boulder, I don't know, probably $100,000 for a redo, for us, a little bit of fertilizer and a little bit of labor over a 3-year period. Another project in Colorado, lots of pesticides, lots of synthetic fertilizers, 15 months, stopping everything cold turkey and beginning a biologically based program. I got criticized for this picture because we walked out in the middle of 7.2 acres, and the staff immediately took me to one bindweed plant in the middle of 7 acres and chastised me because there was a weed in the middle of their field. So that was not Boulder. So I reached down and I pulled that weed out and put it in my pocket, and I said, good IPM, manual eradication. So you get a little bit of the good and a little bit of the bad. But the idea that it works, that kind of a thing, no weeds, baseball, field hockey, chopped right down. There's the Pepperdine pictures. Strong focus on soil health, microbial life focus, education for the turf managers and staff. We teach what to do and why. That's the most important thing, the why of all of this. Appropriate fertilizer and water. The Irvine Unified, on that pictures I showed you, where we were watering 6 days a week. It's now twice. It will go to 1 day a week in a week or 10 days. So what's the desired outcome? Improvement in turf and landscape quality, reduction in water use, reduction in cost over time, most importantly, the health and safety of our children. I get asked all the time about qualifying the cost, and I said, cannot have this discussion based on the cost of a bag of organic fertilizer versus synthetic without having the discussion on the cost of children's health. And that's the reality, and that's not necessarily what they always want to hear. So we begin in discussion with decision makers. We rely on the science, not on emotions. We're non-confrontational, point to examples, encourage pilot projects. The end result is we can usually experience success. You know, none of us, I don't think any of us that work in this field got up this morning and said, hey, an organic lawn or natural management would be a good thing to do. I think that it's driven by, the understanding that, John, just like John said it, all this stuff that we have been sold a bill of goods. And when you understand what happens with a pesticide and a synthetic fertilizer bag, what does everybody do? They flip over the back of the bag and you do exactly what a manufacturer wants you to do. So I always tell people when they're skeptical, just follow the money and see where the money trail goes. And the money trail goes into somebody else's pocket. So there always has to be the discussion on that cost to protect human health and managing the chemical-free framework. Thank you.